So hello, everyone. We'd like to welcome you to our webinar today, Accreditation and Public Relations Overview. We're going to be talking about the exciting process of how to achieve your accreditation, and we look forward to telling you more about that journey. We're going to start with an introduction from Sharon Tatum Garcia, who is the Director of Communications for the Eastern Michigan Division of the Salvation Army. We'll also have our guest panelists, who will talk a little bit about their APR journey. We have Kristen Sokol, who is a director at Tanner Friedman, and Mark Geary, who is the head of communications at Beaumont. My name is Jen Rosowski. I am the Director of Communications for Education Trust Midwest. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Sharon for the wonderful welcome.
Hello, thank you for joining us, and thank you for your interest in the Accreditation and Public Relations. You are in great hands with our APR committee, and I also want to thank you for your PRSA Detroit membership. I achieved my APR in 2011, and I do believe that my APR set me above my competition during my most recent job search for the candidacy of this position at the Salvation Army. I have a few tips for the APR. I wanted to guide you to treat it like an academic pursuit. For the test, dust off your college study skills, the reading, the outlining, and the note cards. And for the panel presentation, you'll want to use the established 4-point planning process, which you'll hear more about. Use all the tools at your disposal, including these guides that you have on this webinar today, and go straight through if you can. Don't stop. Make it your primary focus. Having your leadership buy-in and support in achieving the APR really helps so that you can add it to your professional goals at work. And then when you achieve the APR, pay it forward. Serve on an APR panel presentation, serve as a mentor, join a PRSA Detroit committee, and wear your pen with pride, which I am doing here on my collar. I want to thank you again for your interest. And now I just have something that I have to read regarding our antitrust statement for the distribution, which we need to read at all of our PRSA meetings. So hang on tight and I will get through this part. PRSA's policy is to comply fully and strictly with all federal and state antitrust laws. Meetings and programs held under the auspices of PRSA must be conducted in a manner that avoids the fact or appearance of conduct that may violate the antitrust laws. Participants are not to discuss industry-wide or individual company prices, current or projected, or matters relating to pricing such as costs, profits, contractual terms and conditions, discounts, credit terms, wage salaries, market allocation, market shares, sales, or clients, customers, or other competitively sensitive information. Compliance with the antitrust laws is a requirement for PRSA membership, and a responsibility for compliance rests with each member. Participants in PRSA members' meetings and programs have an obligation to terminate any discussion, seek legal counsel's advice, or if necessary, terminate any meeting if the discussion may be construed or raise any antitrust risk. So that's our soapbox on antitrust statements. So back to the topic at hand. I want to take you back to Jen, and she will begin the program. Thank you again for your membership and for your interest in the APR. I will help you in any way possible, as will this team. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. That was a wonderful welcome. And now we're about to get started talking a little bit about this exciting journey. If we could advance to the next slide. So we'll start by talking a little bit about the objectives of the APR and understanding what the accreditation is in public relations and why it's important, learning a little bit more about the process and making sure it's clear and easy to understand, hearing about the resources available, of which there are many, to support you with the process, including your own Detroit PRSA APR committee, and knowing the steps for the deadline for our Detroit process for this year. So first, let's talk about what is the accreditation. It's important to understand that this is the public relation industry's only national postgraduate certification program and also a recognized standard. We want everyone to understand that this journey is a unique pursuit and recognizes you as a key practitioner who understands the key facets of the public relations field, and it will set you apart in your, we believe in both the industry and in your work. Achieving the APR signifies that you have a high level of skill and competency in the PR field, and the process itself is administered by the Universal Accreditation Board, of which PRSA is one of 9 leading industry organizations. And a wonderful bonus is after you achieve this elite accreditation, you get to have APR after your name. And we would love for you to envision that now, and we look forward to helping you through the process. So why do you want to seek accreditation? There are a number of reasons, and for each person, the journey is unique, and the reasons for pursuing accreditation may be unique to you. So essentially, this accreditation demonstrates that you're a highly skilled and ethical PR professional. Additionally, this does have the potential to open doors to career advancement. And as you heard Sharon say, and I know that a number of our APRs would concur with this, having the APR after your name, which signifies this elite accreditation, says to potential employers and even your own employer that you have done something special, the extra hard work to achieve this accreditation. It also, of course, it enhances your own knowledge, skills, and abilities and reinforces the work that you are doing. And as an overall benefit to everyone in PR, it helps elevate the status of the profession as a whole. And in summary, of course, this makes you a stronger practitioner, which we know we all want to be. So I'm going to turn it over to Kristen, who's going to talk about the steps to the accreditation process. Kristen.
Thank you, Jen. There are some standard steps for you to take in your journey toward accreditation. And just so that you understand, you have a year from the time that you are approved by national, but we have put together a calendar that will help you be recognized in the same calendar year as the chapter's annual meeting. So in order to be recognized in the same year, the very first step that you'll need to do is put in your examination application with national. That says that you're interested in earning accreditation and that you're approved to do so. We recommend that you do that in June. And then we not only receive an alert from national, but you should also alert us of your interest, especially if you need support. We're also recommending that you have your panel presentation candidate questionnaire, which we'll talk more about, completed by the end of July. This affords you the opportunity to present in August, which then gives you ample time to continue your course of study for the exam with Prometrics. And if you complete all of those things by November 1st of this year, then you'd be recognized at the November annual meeting for 2021. If you don't complete it by November 1st, 2021, that does not mean that your APR journey ends. What that means is that you would be recognized in the 2022 annual meeting. So this is why we're recommending the timeline with this chapter. But please understand that from the time of your application, you do have 1 year to complete the course of study. When you submit your examination application, you need to be a member in good standing of PRSA. So that means that all of your dues are up to date and your membership profiles. You can either do one payment of $385, or you can divide it into 2 payments, which would ultimately be a total of $410. Once you have submitted your application and you've been approved, please notify Jen and myself so that we know that you're on the journey and that we can offer you any supports the chapter has available along the way. One of the first steps in your journey is preparing your panel presentation candidate questionnaire. As part of the course of study, you'll see that the questionnaire includes responding to 14 questions in a narrative format. Part of those questions overviews your organization, your role in that organization, your view in the field of public relations. And then the other part of it is your direct experience with an emphasis on programming. And we'll go through that questionnaire in greater detail in just a minute. The PRSA Detroit Accreditation Committee will contact candidates who have already earned their APR to evaluate your presentation after we receive your questionnaire. So we cannot coordinate that panel for you until we receive your completed questionnaire as a first step. Once we've received your questionnaire, we will then, as I mentioned, put together a panel of APRs in the Detroit chapter who will serve as your evaluation panel. And you'll be scored on 12 key areas of knowledge, skills, and abilities, which are all detailed in the packet supportive of the APR journey. But essentially, you'll need to demonstrate a mastery of skills, particularly in RPIE. So research, planning, implementation, and evaluation. So it's strongly recommended that you use a program that best exhibits all of the skills you need to faithfully execute public relations. And if your program does have holes, of course, acknowledging what those are and fulfilling them. Once you give your panel presentation, you will be given an advanced, not advanced recommendation from the panel, but that is not delivered directly to you. It is goodness gracious. It is directed to the UAB, and the UAB will give you your official advanced, not advanced, within 3 to 4 weeks of your completed panel presentation. If for any reason you do not advance, you can repeat that panel presentation, and our chapter committee will help you reorganize that retake. In preparing for your panel presentation, again, I cannot stress enough, please use a program that best exemplifies a major role that you played in research, implementation, or research planning, implementation, and evaluation. It can be paid or volunteer, but the stronger the program, the better you'll be able to fulfill all of the questions as part of that presentation. And it should be one that you play a major role in, not one that you played a supporting role in to show your knowledge and skill as a PR practitioner. When we give these in person, oftentimes a presenter will choose to either do a portfolio, a presentation, or both. Recognize that in this current time, it may not be an option for us to do an in-person panel. So you should proceed in putting together a digital portfolio, whether you choose to do that in PowerPoint or in a different program, that exemplifies all of the assets that would support your questionnaire. So that would include examples of perhaps press releases you may have used to support that, presentations, if you did ad copy as part of your program, demonstrating commercials, etc. Your plan can have holes in it. We recognize that in the real world, you can't always implement all of the best practices as you would like because of resources or restrictions. However, you should be able to acknowledge what those holes are and explain what you would have done differently if you had all of the resources at your disposal or based on what you learned subsequent to the program that you may have changed upon implementing it. You'll be judged by 3 APRs who will observe your presentation and evaluate based on those 12 skills that we talked about. That presentation is up to 2 hours, but it is a minimum of 1 hour, and that does include Q&A. You'll explain the program that you outlined in your questionnaire and be prepared to answer questions that may request additional detail from what you've had in your questionnaire or ask you to think about some things that you may not have talked about there. It's similar to a job interview format where you're presenting your best self and all of your skills. Again, the panelists will determine if they recommend an advance, do not advance. It will go to national. And then you'll receive your official notification. Once you receive your advance, then you're able to move on to the computer-based portion of the exam. Again, if you do not advance, you have to wait 90 days to retry, but our committee is committed to helping you achieve that. A few general tips for your panel presentation. As Sharon mentioned at the top, think about this as an academic exercise. This is something that you would have presented to a professor, or you would present to leadership of your company or a client, and you're selling your work and your achievements so that everyone understands your knowledge and skills. But stick to what you're most familiar with. If you are not a crisis communicator, your program probably shouldn't focus on crisis communications, because you want to really demonstrate your skills. If your experience is narrow, you may want to think about supplemental programming that could demonstrate your other skills that you could still talk about as part of this panel presentation. Because what we're really trying to determine is how well-rounded you are in all of the skills that it takes to be a PR pro. Jen, I believe that you are going to talk a little bit about the examination itself.
I think we're going to hand that off to Mark, in fact, because Mark most recently has taken that exam, and he's an expert in how that goes, especially during a pandemic. So let's hand it off to Mark.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm an expert, but I'm happy to take this part of it. So the computer-based exam, I think, was the part that I had a lot of questions about personally, and wondered about. If you've been doing communications or PR for a decent amount of time, you might think, well, do I really need to study for this exam? I know what I'm doing in my job. And I'll tell you, yes, you do need to study. There is actually a very beneficial study guide that is free, available from the PRSA website. And there's also some textbooks. The Cutlip and Center book is, I think, one of the most popular. And you absolutely need to study for this exam to succeed in it. What you see on the screen right now is kind of a breakdown of the types of questions that you'll be asked about. You can see many of the questions, about a third of them, are about the RPIE process, which Kristen just referenced. Next section would be business literacy, problem solving, managing relationships, and such. And communication models and theories is the smallest portion of the exam. So it's a good mix of things that you'll need to study and review for in advance of this test. So one of the things that I got to do, and I think I may have been one of the first people in our area to do, is I actually took the exam at home online instead of going to a Prometric center, because all of the Prometric centers were actually closed in our area because of the pandemic. So when you take it through the online Prometric software, it's kind of interesting because it feels like you're actually in an exam room. You log in on your computer, and just like you see us here in a Zoom meeting, there is an actual live person who comes on and talks to you, and that person is monitoring you just like a real life proctor would do as well. So you'll see that person and you'll talk to them and interact with them, and they'll kind of verify that you have a clear workspace. I actually had to pick up my laptop and point the camera all around the room to show there was nothing in the room. And then they're monitoring you throughout the exam. So definitely it's a secure environment and very much mimics what you would find if you went into a testing center. It is a long test. They give you up to 3 hours and more than 3 hours to take this test. So you need to book some time and make sure that you are ready to commit to it, and know that it's a very thorough test where you're going to have to read a lot of scenario-based questions. It's not so much recall, it's more, here's the situation, and based on the knowledge you have, apply that knowledge to choose the correct response. There are, of course, some, just basic recall questions on there, but the majority really require you to apply the knowledge that you've learned through what you've studied. In order to pass, You need to get 99 of the questions correct, of the graded questions. There are also some beta questions mixed in there, which is typical for any sort of standardized test. After you submit your test, you take it online, whether you go to a testing center or take it from home, you will get an immediate response about whether or not you passed or not. But then it will take a couple weeks to get officially notified from PRSA that you passed or did not. So some general tips for studying, look at that pie chart, which we saw a few slides ago, and that can help you figure out what areas to focus on and where you really want to spend your time. Like I said, the big thing is to not just read and try to memorize, but actually read to understand. So when you're learning about the different elements that are discussed in the study guide, as well as in the textbook, it's not just about memorization. You really have to understand what they're talking about and understand how that applies to a real life situation in order to succeed in the exam. As you're taking the exam, one of the neat things that you can do is if you're struggling and you're debating between a couple of answers, you can actually flag it, and then you can come back and look at it later and decide if you like that answer you gave or if you want to change it. It does feel hard. It was an effort. I had to study quite a bit for it. I'm thrilled that I passed on my first go around, but I also know some people who didn't and came back and were able to pass again. So don't feel discouraged if you don't pass that first time around. You can absolutely go back and give it another shot.
Great, and I'm going to take it away from here, Mark, a little on the preparation resources. So managing information overload, as we heard from our other panelists, this is a big to-do. There's a lot to cover with these 12 knowledge, skills, and abilities areas. And the course of study is rigorous. So you'll want to consider how to pace yourself and spread this out over time so you're able to achieve this gold. We should have this as a gold star instead of a gold circle because it is such a massive achievement. Some suggestions: prioritize study topics, establish a study schedule, and certainly leverage support and resources. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the next slides. There are an abundance of resources available, and you see here on the PRaccreditation.org webpage, there's just umpteen resources that you can refer to. Both, I think Kristen mentioned some, Sharon mentioned some, and Mark mentioned some resources already. The candidate panel presentation instruction guide is really useful because the panel presentation itself is an important process that you really want to understand how you'll be presenting, and this guide will give you a great overview of that process. There are a number of recommended textbooks. Mark referenced one that I relied upon heavily, the Cutlip and Center's Effective Public Relations. I think that's one of the standards that many people use as part of their journey, and it really does cover I would say that it covers pretty much everything that you need to know. However, I supplemented and wanted to make sure that I was able to achieve this process, and supplemented with a number of additional textbooks too that delve deeper into segments of the course of study. The study guide, which is available online free, some people do rely on that alone. It's, I believe, a 300+ page guide and does go over everything you would need to know. It might even help help you to pace yourself when you're looking through that, because it tackles each of the knowledge, skills, and abilities areas in documented segments that could help you create your year-long study calendar. And by the way, some people do recommend, I didn't do this, I don't know about our fellow panelists, but I would highly recommend beginning your pursuit of study before you actually reach out to start the year-long process, because that will give you some headway in making sure you understand the process and know what you're in for when you do have that concrete year-long time frame that you do have to achieve this within. I also found it really helpful to to use the online prep course, which you do have to pay for. Here you see there's a reduced price for members of PRSA. Because the APR can be such a solo pursuit, you're doing it largely on your own unless you, and we can help you with this, unless you find a cohort or a study group. You may be doing this over time while balancing your full-time job and other duties, and trying to find a way to make sure that you prioritize this journey, as both Kristen and Sharon mentioned, as an academic pursuit. What may help you to do this could be in the online study course, which again, not only goes over all of the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you need, it also creates it presents them in a series of modules for which you would be taking mini tests. And I found that really helpful because it helped me to identify the areas where I needed work and then could further supplement with my many textbooks and resources. And then of course, there's the APR online sample test, which I thought was, which I'm sure we all take. That is an excellent opportunity to help you see in a nutshell what you're going to be covering and kind of how the test will just be laid out. Some of us, as you'll hear from fellow APRs, used all sorts of additional tools, and you'll find them when you're working through your pursuit. I know that a number of us, I included, used flashcards, both teeny handwritten ones that I would carry in my purse for any time that I was at the grocery store or otherwise stuck in one place. And rather than reading the New York Times on my phone, I flipped to my my little teeny weeny flashcards. There are also a number of flashcards that other APRs have put online that are digital flashcards that you will find. And as I've mentioned to others, and I highly recommend this, I found that if you have one, my Amazon Alexa was a great study partner. And I used her frequently to ask her about time periods and historical facts and theories that you might need to immerse yourself in and understand as part of the test. So there are a variety of skills, and I'm sure you'll find the ones that work for you. And note that we are certainly here to help you in any way find the ones that would be great for your journey. So another wonderful thing, and then I'm going to hand this off to Mark in a moment, is the idea of having a mentor. We are more than willing to help set you up with a mentor. I had a mentor and found that person was really extremely invaluable to me to help make sure that I understood the process. She was there for whenever I had questions. She reviewed my presentation, gave feedback, my panel presentation, and we are more than happy to help you find someone who would be just right for you. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Mark to talk a little bit about his mentor and how he worked with his mentor individually.
Yeah, I can't stress enough the value of having a mentor. I was really fortunate that my mentor was someone you saw earlier in this presentation, Sharon Tatum Garcia. And Sharon was really helpful to me, especially because I think this whole process, when you look at it, it sounds very intimidating and overwhelming. So getting to talk to somebody about, hey, what is this really like, or what does this mean? And am I on the right track? Was really important to me, and I really valued it. Sharon and I met a couple of times for coffee, and she helped talk through the process with me. She also looked over my survey, my additional questionnaire that was the beginning of the process, and then I talked with her about my panel presentation as well. So really, I didn't really know anyone else who had achieved an APR. So it was really valuable to me to have a real person I could talk to and kind of ask sometimes what I thought were silly questions, but Sharon was always very accommodating and willing to help me. And also it's a good way to network and connect with someone, by working together. And I think anybody in PRSA would welcome being a mentor. Kristen and Jen helped line me up with Sharon, and also Kristen and Jen are were very helpful as well. And I'd like to be able to return that favor to others too, because I know it can be a lot. So reach out and ask for help. There's no question that is silly. Ask away.
So in conclusion, we'll kind of overview some pieces that we've already talked about and what your next steps are going to look like. Again, this is to maintain the chapter's timeline so that you can get your well-deserved recognition at the annual meeting. So again, we are recommending that you complete your application in June. Make sure that once you've submitted that to national and you are approved, notify Jen and myself so that we can put you on the path to having access to all of the resources that our chapter has to offer you to support you in that journey. We're recommending that you submit your completed candidate questionnaire by July 30th. This ensures that we're able to work with you to schedule your panel presentation in August. And then you'll give your panel presentation at a date that we can coordinate that works for you and your panelists. We try to offer some flexibility for that because we know that your everyday life happens. Once you've completed your panel presentation and you get your advance notice, then you can take your computer-based exam. You need to do that within 1 year of your application acceptance. And as we noted earlier, there are options to do that at home. So if Prometrics is closed based on environment, or you feel more comfortable, you do have that option for virtual. You have that option for virtual for your candidate presentation too. So don't let in-person be an intimidation or an excuse for you as to why you don't want to pursue that this year. We have your back for that. So if you are able to take your computer-based examination and pass by November 1st, then you'll be able to be recognized at our annual meeting in November 2021. If you needed just additional time to complete your computer-based exam or you need to do a retake, you absolutely can and would be recognized at the 2022 annual meeting. Once you earn your APR, your journey is not over, friends. You need to continue to show your dedication to the field. And so once you earn your APR, it remains active for 3 years. To maintain your credentials, you need to continue to be a member in good standing. Make sure you pay all of your dues, you're still a member. And then every 3 years, you'll need to submit a renewal application and a $75 fee to renew that. As part of that renewal process, over the 3 years, you'll need to accumulate 10 points in 3 renewal categories: continuing education, professionalism, and community service. So continuing education can be your participation in conferences, in webinars, in our local chapter programs. Your professionalism is being engaged with the chapter, for example. That could be volunteering to be on a committee or in a leadership of the committee. It could be presentations that you give that help advance the field, or even awards that you earn. And then, of course, community service. So if you are doing PR work pro bono, National is recognizing you for that, and that can be part of your renewal process. There is an entire worksheet that you fill in and submit back, and so there is an entire outline of all of the things that are applicable to your renewal points. If at any time you have any questions about the Detroit chapter's timeline, or there's a piece of the process that you don't understand or that you need clarification, if you need a mentor support, please contact Jen, Mark, or myself, and we are happy to help you through any step of the way, any questions that you have. We want to make sure that you are fully supported in this journey. And so with that, we will look at any questions that may have been submitted in the chat. And I also wanted to take one step back because Mark was one of our first chapter individuals who did panel presentation entirely virtually. We had planned an in-person presentation for him. It was, I think, Mark, maybe 2 days before we were actually supposed to get together in person. We had to do an about face and reschedule virtually for you. So I hoped you may be able to talk a little bit about your experience doing a virtual panel.
It was, yeah, it definitely had to change very quickly and go to that virtual panel presentation. At that time, I think we were all still kind of getting used to life on Zoom and Microsoft Teams, but now I think we're all much more familiar with it. But really, it would be just like any standard Zoom meeting that you have probably participated in within the past year. So when you go on to a Zoom meeting, you present, you see your panelists, you can talk to them and interact with them. And it felt very, at the time it felt a little strange because like I said, we weren't used to living on Zoom and Teams, but right now I don't think it would feel like any different at all. Hopefully we will all move beyond this pandemic at some point and not be having to do things virtually, but it also does, I think it's easier access too, because you don't really have to go anywhere. You can do it right from your kitchen table and give your presentation like that and play your, if you have a PowerPoint, you can play that over the Zoom and be in good shape. All right, looks like we have some questions coming in.
One question that I did see was about conflicts of interest in your panel. So we make a very conscious effort to make sure that any panelist who is evaluating your presentation understands that your presentation is confidential and that they are not in an industry that would be a competitor to you. So for example, with Mark being in the healthcare industry, we made sure that none of his panelists were in a competing healthcare organization so that there would be no chance of a confidentiality breach in any sort of way.
It looks like the next question is, do you think completing your APR status is grounds for prompting a discussion with your boss regarding a promotion? I guess what I would say for that is I think it shows that you're committed to your craft. Obviously, just getting a designation does not necessarily equal a promotion, but it shows that you are committed to this profession. And in theory, you should be getting better at your job and not just getting those 3 letters after your name, but using what you've learned throughout the process. And that, as a result, should make you more effective and then hopefully set you up for success or a potential promotion down the line. I think we heard Sharon say early on in the beginning that she thinks that her APR designation helps set her apart from other applicants to get the job she has right now.
Great answer, Mark. I would love to, I see a question on, do you think the APR status is more valuable than pursuing higher education? And that's an interesting one. I think that's an individual question. I happen to take the crazy stance of pursuing my APR at the same time that I decided after 20 plus years that I wanted to pursue my master's in strategic communications. So I did them at the same time. I'm still in the process of finalizing my master's. I think that they were super complementary, but I would say that the APR is equally as valuable. It's an incredible course of study that, if we didn't say this clearly, changes the way you think entirely about the field of strategic communications. You will do your work differently and far better going through this process. And I think it was such a succinct journey that was focused on rethinking the way you approach strategic communications, that it stands as a tremendous value on its own. And I would ask either Mark or Kristen if you want to add anything to that as well.
I totally agree. I mean, to me, the only thing I would add to what you said, Jen, is that, when you see that someone has their APR, now that I think I respected it before I really understood it, but now that I've gone through it, I really do look at people with their APR in a different light, because I know that it's not an easy feat, and it really is meaningful.
I'd agree that it's not an either or prospect. It's about your own personal journey and what you hope to gain and what skills you want to build. So going through the APR journey really takes a focus on that RPIE status. And if you go through this process, you'll be better at understanding research and why it's important to any program you implement, how important planning is and what that could look like, making sure that you're able to explain how you implement and why and what those evaluation metrics are. So That's applicable whether you're in a nonprofit, whether you're in a corporation, and particularly, at least from my perspective, coming from an agency, any client that we work with expects us to be able to do all of those things. And there's a certain level of explanation that you just need to be prepared for, that earning your APR gives you more skill to anticipate and respond with. We received a question, is the presentation conversational throughout, or do you present fully without input from the panelists? And your panel presentation is led by you. So if you want to go through your presentation and only take questions at the end, it is absolutely your ability to do that. If you're the type of person who prefers to answer questions while you're still in that part of your presentation, absolutely you can do that. You lead the format of your presentation.
It looks like there's a question that says, is there an APR network that exists once you receive accreditation? I think the network is really connected with PRSA, because you'll find a lot of the folks in PRSA either have their APR or they're pursuing it. But there is, you'll notice, like I said earlier, that when you see people with APR after their name, I think you'll automatically have an instant connection with them. So if you see people on LinkedIn or you see other people in communications roles in the area and you want to reach out to them, I think when they see APR after your name or you see APR after their name, you do have that instant kind of network right there.
I have a quick question to pitch to our fellow panelists, especially because many of the people going through this are working full-time. You may or may not be parents, you have other responsibilities, you may well be volunteers. And I'd be interested in hearing, and for our audience, your reflections on whether you can, for people who may be wondering, how can you find the time to balance that? And I know I want to hear your comments, Mark, because you started on this when the entire world shifted, and you happen to be in an industry where all focus was on you. So do you think that can you explain how and whether it's valuable to be able to figure out how to manage this and how you did that?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, I work for Beaumont, so I'm in healthcare PR, and we've been a little busy the past year with the pandemic. So it would have been. I actually wrote a blog post about this, which you could probably find online. I think that it was valuable to make the time to study for this and to earn the APR. To me, it looked like, I was studying late at night and sometimes on the weekends as well, just to get ready for everything and to get my panel presentation in to prepare for the exam, while juggling a very intense time at work that still continues to be very intense. But I really saw it as complementary. What I was doing and what I was doing to study and prepare for this was helping me in my job. And I was actually able, in many cases, to apply what I was learning about like the next day at work, which was really kind of cool to see. And you don't always get the chance to study and then put into practice what you just studied, the next day. So there was definite value in that. It was a commitment, though. I mean, it's not easy. I had to make a choice to really put the time aside to do this. I also am a parent. I've got 2 kids. So, you can always find, I think, an excuse for why you can't do something or why it isn't the right time. But I kind of told myself, this is important and I'm going to do it. And I'm very happy that I did.
Now, I had the advantage of going through the APR journey pre-pandemic, which I think is now just a new term. Everything is pre and during and post-pandemic. But I really wanted to echo what Mark said in that the pursuit of the APR isn't something that's just isolated from what you're doing every day. your course of study is also applying it through your work. Because as Mark and our other panelists had talked about, the presentation isn't just a regurgitation of knowledge. The test itself isn't just a memorization pursuit. It is applying what you learned for best practices to demonstrate skill. And so while you're studying, it's applying those skills in practice of your everyday work to reinforce what you would demonstrate your knowledge to be as part of that panel presentation and your test. So these are not two things that are completely isolated from one another. They are supportive of one another. And that's kind of how you find the time and balance to do both.
Well put, Kristen.
Thank you. Seeing that we have no other questions from our audience today, I want to thank everyone for joining us for this panel presentation about the APR. And again, I encourage you that if there were any questions we didn't answer for you today, or ones that come up as you plan your pursuit of the APR, please reach out to any one of the three of us and we will absolutely be happy to help you. So thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on your APR journey.